Armchair commanders, we call the shots. From our living room thrones where the action's hot. We're the generals of fiction, the masters of war. In silver screen battles with buttered popcorn. Armchair commanders, armchair commanders.
All right, welcome to the Armchair Commanders podcast. My name is John.
And I'm Jack.
And this week, we are continuing our bonus reel series of our episode-by-episode review of Band of Brothers. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by the guys from the We're Not Lost Private. We Happy Few guys are coming on for a future episode. I'm so sorry about that.
Quite all right. It's a little derivative.
You got 50% right.
Yeah, I've been I was talking to Matt Leach, and so I'm sorry. I got us all flustered and mixed up.
Charge on. Let's do it.
Anyways, We're Not Lost Private podcast. Joe, Layton, thank you for joining us to review Day of Days with us, especially with this being released, or we're planning on having this released on the 80th anniversary for D-Day. So welcome. If you want to tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Layton, you want to go first?
Yeah, so you're 50% right by starting off saying We Happy Few, because I am that with Matt Leach. So I'm the cat herder for We Happy Few. But also, with Joe. So, I'm Layton. I have pulled myself away from what I do with We Happy Few to co-host and put myself out there to co-host We're Not Lost Private alongside Joe Mooch. I'm in the UK and obviously Joe's East Coast, and again, we have to herd cats with timing. So, I think that's a little bit about. Not sure what else to say, to be honest with you.
I'm Joe, retired U.S. Marine, historian, author, tour guide. A few months back, Layton and I were just talking about possibly doing a podcast, something a little bit of our own bent. We like the fact that one of us is a UK guy and the other one is an American, so we could bring the viewpoints of both sides to the pod, which we're finding some decent success to start off. But one of my areas of strength is Easy Company, the 506 and the 506 in general. So, and I've known a lot of those vets over the years and their families, and I'm also the official historian for the Band of Brothers Family Foundation, which is all the family members have made their own foundation with the focus on educating future generations on the role of Easy Company and the broader war effort. Looking forward to this, and frankly, quite honored to be the folks that you bring on to do your D-Day episode. So thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure having you guys. So I guess my first question, obviously we started our series off with the episode Currahee. I don't know if you guys had the chance to check that out, but we had our last guest. His name was Blake, and he was a member of the airborne demonstration team. They're the guys that they're a parachute team that jumps out of C-47s. And I know talking beforehand, Joe, you said you guys had some stuff planned in Normandy around the 80th anniversary, but those guys are going to be doing some parachute drops over there during the anniversary. But one of the first questions we asked him, and I think is a good place to start with you guys as well, is what was your first introduction, or what really got you into the story of Band of Brothers? Was it originally the book, or was it the series? And of those two, how did you actually get into, your stuff of, becoming the historian or getting involved with kind of actually intimately getting involved with the families and the members of Easy?
Go ahead, Layton. Kick it off.
You want me to kick it off? Okay, cool. Definitely the TV series for me. It aired just before I joined the military, so about 23 years ago. Certainly, energized myself to join the military. Certainly, it was. Watching us, made me even more excited to do that. And as soon as the DVD box set came out, I bought it, devoured it numerous times. And I was in my barrack block one day, and I was looking for something, and I came across this bag of books, and then there was Band of Brothers. So that was my introduction to reading the book, and I hate to say it, I've seen in terms of history. I mean, and you could probably see this online as well. Certainly, back in the forums, you can even see it on these days on Facebook. Is the Band of Brothers series shows you certain members of Easy Company, doesn't show everyone. So when I read the book, it opened my eyes to a lot more members of Easy Company that existed, and I wanted to learn more about the 101st, and I sort of read as much as I could, and obviously went down that rabbit hole of even dipping into Vietnam, the 101st in Vietnam, and yeah, that's my introduction. Obviously, sorry, excuse me, in getting to this point, so I was on a Facebook group with Joe, where we sort of moderated Band of Brothers fans, sort of behind the scene kind of stuff, and I decided to do private signings with the cast members called Curry Signings. That's a plug right there. DM me for any information. Shameless plug. But no, that's sort of Curry Signings, and you talk about Matthew Leach. So I did one with Matt Leach, and I'd met him a couple of times beforehand, and we've been chatting on social media about sports that we were into as well. And when I did a signing with Matt, a podcast idea was discussed, and that was the birth of We Happy Few. 506 was me and him doing a private signing and having a bit of a chat post signing, and through that I got to know Joe a little bit more. We chatted a lot more, virtually, because Joe was our history guy on the spot through the live Zooms for the Easy Company episodes. And just through conversation, what Joe said earlier, just through conversation, we were discussing a podcast, and what was that, December time, end of November, December time. And I suppose once we sort of started doing it, it's here we are now kind of thing, really. That's my intro to this. It could go deeper, but
Yeah,
I won't bore you.
Mine's a little bit more dated. My first exposure to Band was the book when it came out. It was actually on the Marine Corps Commandant's reading list for enlisted Marines. My mother had picked up a copy for me. Totally engrossed in it, because unlike previous books that I've read about World War II, it wasn't from the general's point of view. It was from the individual paratrooper's point of view. And to me, I had also read a lot of Vietnam-related stuff, most of it by a guy named Keith William Nolan, who wrote in a similar vein. And to me, it was all about the guys down on the ground at the tactical level who were doing the fighting, because, these grand arrows on a map, views of the battle didn't tell the whole story. And to me, that's why Band was so engaging. And it actually came out around 9/11, if I remember correctly, if my memory's not too shoddy. And back then, we really didn't think about reaching out and talking to famous people, not like nowadays where so many people are so accessible. To me, it was more along the lines of, wow, these guys are fantastic. They reminded me of my own grandfathers. One was a naval veteran of World War II. The other was an Air Corps veteran of World War II, both in the Pacific Theater. And I think that's another reason why I connected with Band so well. Fast forward to early 2003, we're in Kuwait getting ready to launch Operation Iraqi Freedom. And I just, on a lark, decided I was going to write Dick Winters a letter, which I did. And he answered, and he basically, I had commented on his leadership and how he managed to weigh making difficult decisions about that could mean life and death with his troops, with his relationship with them. How do you order men to death that you have known and trained with for 2+ years? And he, it was a fine balance and a fine line he walked. And to me, that was very impressive. So I wrote him a letter, and he basically told me when I got back, I don't really do this anymore, but send me your book. I'll sign it and get it back to you. And kind of kicked off my relationship with the Easy veterans, and later on their families as well. I'm still obviously still in touch with them. Go to the reunions every year and spend time with them. They're basically what's the word used now? Family.
Right.
So they're family. We've known them so many years, and they're all very special people to us. So and that's where we're at. Like Leighton said, we were just talking December last year. We had some ideas about podcasts. We did want Easy Company and Band of Brothers to be kind of a tentpole topic that we would periodically run back to and do shows on. Um, but we're not really focused entirely on them. If you visit our site with the We're Not Lost private podcast, we're on Buzzsprout and Spotify and YouTube. You'll see a selection of videos that have a selection of topics about World War II, and I think only Easy Company appears in two of the vids that we have up right now. But like I said, it's a tentpole show for us. It's for a lot of, I think, Leighton, when we talked one time, you used the phrase, it's a gateway drug for a lot of people into the World War II history uh, piece. And that with Saving Private Ryan, and then you have the Pacific, and now Masters of the Air. You have all these not always historically accurate products, but definitely well done, and some excellent storytelling for people to enter into that historical arena. And but again, we're privileged to be here and to talk about a subject that is so near and dear to our hearts.
Not to, I hate bringing this up because every time I do, the reaction I always get is either it makes me feel super young or it makes whoever I'm talking to feel super old. But I was like 7 when this series came out. um, and I didn't even get to watch it until I want to say like 2002. Like it was a solid minute after it came out when I first got to watch it. My parents were very uh, liberal with their allowance of my consumption of violent media as a child, which probably explains a lot of my issues as an adult now. But I remember having, you mentioned having like the DVD box set. I like the first time I got to watch it, I grew up watching it on the giant, like 1.5 foot wide VHS box set
Yeah.
that had like the little Velcro tab to open it up. And uh, I swear that tape almost became unplayable because like as a kid I loved the first 3 episodes of this series. I just absolutely loved. I love Curry, I love Day of Days, and my favorite episode out of the entire series is Karen Tan. So I'm
Well,
very excited.
to make you feel very, very not old, we actually recorded them on VHS when they were airing, and we were watching them. I was watching them on repeat. I'm sure my wife was sick of them.
Um,
Yeah.
but you're very much right in the fact that Band of Brothers is a gateway series. Um, you know, as like I started becoming really into history when I was little, like 6, 7, because I started off with like genealogy, which I think is a place a lot of people start off with when it comes to history interests. And I got into World War II because I found out I had multiple family members who served in World War II, and then this series came out, and after I watched it, I saw the book at Barnes and Noble one day, like on the shelf. And so, like me as an 8-year old, I was like, I want to read that book. And my parents are like, yeah, whatever. It's in the history section. It's got to be fine. And so I had probably read that book like a dozen times by the time I got through high school. But I was fortunate enough because my dad, he was an active duty service member uh, up until like '07. So I grew up on a military base most of my childhood. Um, and it was a big military base. I grew up on Travis Air Force Base out on the West Coast, and they had an air museum there. And as a kid, I actually ended up started volunteering there, just doing little odd jobs and whatnot. But one of the benefits of that was they were always having events there where they were bringing in veterans to do like speaking events or reunions and stuff like that. So like as a kid, I got to meet a ton of these World War II vets. I never got the chance to meet an Easy Company member. The closest association I ever got was I met a couple of C-47 pilots who did the airborne drops.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be kind of a good place for us to transition to, which is, this episode starts with the C-47s flying into France, and they fly into all the anti-aircraft fire, and we see the violence and the explosions, and everybody's jumping. It's chaos. What did you guys think of the opening to this episode?
It's straight into the action, isn't it? As you can probably see it flashing off my face, because I'm sort of trying to remind myself as we go along and I don't misstep. Like Joe messaged me earlier, or I seen Joe's Facebook status, about, he should be refreshing, but he's obviously watched it a million times. But I do need to refresh because I haven't watched it this year, so I'm a little bit disappointed in myself. You're straight into the action, aren't you? And you're sort of wondering who's going to live, who's going to die in that, not in a morbid way, or these are real people. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Joe, help me out here, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's that slow bank out of the, through the clouds, and then all of a sudden it's the shock. You get that shock and awe, the first bang, and then all of a sudden the light show begins. And I remember later on, I mean, the first time I viewed it, I was absolutely knocked out about it. I was just watching it, and you get a new appreciation for the visual representation of what those guys went through. But funny thing, in talking to Buck Compton many years ago, and Buck told me, he said, I don't remember it being that loud and that bright and that much stuff flying around. It's quite possible. I mean, it's experiences vary, right? With a lot of things.
Right.
When I spoke with the vets about it, but to me that sequence was so graphic and dynamic and visceral. It really set the stage, and I think that was part of the brilliance of HBO and releasing the 2 episodes, because you get the hook in folks. That first the first broadcast, it was the 2 episodes back to back, and then they went 1 per week. And it was really interesting to understand why, because when you speak to people like John Orloff or other folks that were involved in there, or Eric Gendrins, and they tell you, yeah, that was definitely a calculated move, because you have that slow build up through Kuriki, that first episode, and then you build up, and you get the hook in with the action.
Yeah.
And now in realistically, those, when you, in episode 1, when you see the load ups, those sticks are mishmash. They're not actually correct. Some of the guys are on the wrong sticks with the wrong people, but obviously you can't have a full company of paratroopers for this thing, so you do the best you can to manage it. But I just thought that slow flight in, the slow panning and the flight in, the guys tapping cigarettes to pack them. They're sitting there, they're thinking. Some guys are praying. It's the perfect setup for when they come out of the clouds. And then, boom, you're in the middle of it.
Yeah. I think Joe, that's a really good point about first 2 episodes released at the same time. I can't remember that. It probably did happen in the UK, but I absolutely can't remember it. But I think if they did...
I'm too old.
Yeah. I should really see if I can find a TV guide from then. To see if that did happen here. But I think if we released just episode 1 and then waited a week, I don't think it would have had the same effect. So what you're saying is you're having them back-to-back episodes, you're hooked. You're straight into the action for the next episode. So you've enjoyed it, and episode 2 is shown straight after. So you don't have to watch it because you've enjoyed it. And yeah, you're straight into the action. So I think that's the hook in, isn't it? You're right. I think absolutely, it's a genius move.
Yeah. Plus, you get the time to absorb the names and faces in the first episode, and then apply it to the second one. Where if they just show Currahee,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a bit of a jumble if you let 7 days go by before you broadcast.
Yeah, that was, I think, probably my only big beef from the first episode was like you get like shotgun blasted with like 24 names, and you're like, okay, who's who? Um, but Jack, what did you think of the opening sequence for this episode?
Yeah. It was quite the doozy, just opening straight up. Clouds and then flak going off. Man. And the old men talking about like, oh yeah, got blown up before I even jumped out of the thing. I lost my goddamn leg bag.
Yeah, I love there's some good sequences in there that they obviously did their homework. When you watch Winters come out of the aircraft, his leg bag comes off. If you look for it, it's a split-second thing. The part where Cobb gets hit in the aircraft, that actually happened. Luz was actually at the back of the aircraft, and he had a leg bag with a radio in it, and he went to Welsh before they loaded up and said, "Hey, Lieutenant, I got this leg bag. It weighs 50 pounds. It's going to take me forever to get to the door." And he's like, "Okay, switch with Cobb." So he switches places with Cobb. Cobb gets hit in the aircraft on the way. That actually happened. He stays on the aircraft and rides it back, and he gets treated. So all those, there were lots of little historical accuracies in there, because there'll always be somebody who's going to complain about the inaccuracies, small details here and there, or sometimes big details. But in that case, they did the research right, and it sets up for further scenes, like Winters coming down and not having his leg bag, and he does the pull in with the rope, and gets the frayed end in his hand and basically shows it to the camera.
I love that, because then he gets the like the momentary, just like throws it on the ground, like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's true too, because my tours, I lead, one of my major stops is just outside of St. Mariglis, in the area where he landed. And it's easy to show, like, there's a Y intersection, and at the Y intersection was where the AAA battery was, and his leg bag landed on the opposite side of the road across from where he was, and to get to it, he would have had to expose himself to that battery, and so he doesn't go back and get it. Like, they did a good job, and at least, if not hitting accurately all the time, at least trying to skirt it and be in the right ballpark with the accuracy piece.
I wanted to kind of hit on, you mentioned, people who complain about minor and major inaccuracies, and something that I've been able to reflect on, now being older and having watched and read the material multiple times now, and having been able to, further expand my like World War II knowledge. I mentioned earlier that I had the chance to meet some C-47 pilots before, who were part of the Normandy drops. And as a kid, I remember them actually complaining about Band of Brothers. It's not really shown in this episode, but Stephen E. Ambrose, when he wrote the book, there's a small little passage that he adds in his book about how, the transport pilots were poorly trained and like didn't know what they were doing and were panicking and all this. And those guys hated that representation of it. It isn't it isn't shown as well in this show. You still get that panic, but I think the panic you see in this episode is a realistic reaction to like a combat scene, I think.
Yeah.
But I was wondering what you guys thought about that representation, because that conversation I had with those guys at a young age has always stuck with me. And I recall I've gotten into 2 internet comment fights in my entire life, and one of them is about the training of C-47 pilots. So what do you guys think about that?
funny enough, I was going through some old files on my, and I found a 56-page argument between a troop carrier historian, a brother of a 506 trooper, and some troop carrier crewman, and that was the topic. I think, like you said, I think it was a good representation. There's in the mini series, in that sequence, as much as you see the one pilot that's afraid, you see the other pilots are, we have to press on, we have to get them to their drop zones. I thought there was a very respectful representation there. I do agree that in Band, it's an awful description of their one, training, and two, performance. Yeah, the troop carrier, I completely agree with you, and my same experience and observing this argument from afar, and I was lucky to find the file actually, so I could go back from the root of the argument and work its way through and watch how the troop carrier pilots and crewmen explained how they were not undertrained. The amount of hours the lead pilots had to have was ridiculously high. Were there some that pilots that didn't have as many hours? Sure, but that's like saying you had guys from Toccoa who were in Toccoa, and 2 years later they're jumping into Normandy, and you had replacements that came right before the Normandy operation. Didn't make them any less of a paratrooper, right? Doesn't make them any less a troop carrier pilot. Are they less experienced? Sure. Does it mean they're going to react poorly? Could be. Or they're just going to react just like everybody else does and do their job. So I think there's a balance to be brought to that argument. But I think those guys have every right to be upset with the written form of Ambrose's description of their performance.
I found it interesting because, you know, once you read like one Ambrose book, you end up reading pretty much all of them because he has a very good style of writing that makes it easy to consume content. And, you know, one of my favorite World War II and D-Day stories in particular is the seizing of Pegasus Bridge. And I found it so interesting that in his book about Pegasus Bridge, he talked a little bit about like the airdrops and glider drops for Sicily. And in that book, he specifically cites like, yeah, the C-47 pilots were specifically told to avoid taking fire at all costs because the C-47s hadn't been equipped with self-sealing fuel tanks yet. And I was like, why don't you have that paragraph in Band of Brothers? Like that makes things make way more sense. Like,
Yeah, well, you had to ratchet up the drama a bit.
right.
Yeah, the thing with the argument from the troop carrier crewmen were they did everything right up until they hit the cloud banks, right? And the cloud banks were the game changer because they were flying in radio silence. They're using visual cues to keep the squadrons in order. And when you can't see in front of your face, how are you going to keep your visual cueing? They all had contingency planning if they did run into that kind of weather. Some of the squadrons adhered to it, others didn't. But the ones I really want to give a lot of credit to are the pilots that flew their planes through it, got to the coast of the Cotentin over the invasion beaches and said, we're going back in. I mean, that's a lot of guts right there. You've been exposed to incoming fire. You've flown through this horrendous cloud bank, and you decide you still got to get your guys over their drop zones, and you're turning back in. And I remember a story that Forrest Goody told me. Goody told me that when they were at Benning doing their qualification jumps, Joe Ramirez, they went up for their first jump and he froze. And I've told this to Renee, who played Joe in Band of Brothers. We've had to talk about this, in fact, just down in Toccoa a couple weeks back. And Renee loves the story of Dominguez, not Joe Dominguez, Joe Ramirez. On the first pass, Ramirez refused to jump. And they basically sat him down. The jump master came back, talked to him, and said, "Hey, we'll give you one more shot. If you don't jump, you're out of the airborne." And they bring the plane back around, and Ramirez jumps. And Goody and Rod Stroll basically told me that it took more guts for him to jump on a second pass than it did for him to go out on the first one. And I think that applies to the guys, the troop carrier crewmen who brought their planes back into um, that situation, knowing full well they could get blasted out of the sky again, and still did it. So a lot of credit has to be given to those men for doing their jobs. And there were quite a few C-47s. Obviously, the photographic evidence exists that were shot down delivering paratroopers on D-Day. So have to give them a lot of credit. I mean, there's not many people who could do that job. And frankly, if you're not one of them, you're really underqualified to make a judgment. So
I think one of the moments in that transport scene when Lieutenant Meehan's plane takes a hit is very well shot. Is very powerful. You know, you see the engine go up, and then a split second later, the entire cabin is filled with flame. And I was like, that just I think that really ratcheted that scene up a whole nother level.
yeah, and I thought they did an excellent job too of watching the plane auger in, because by all accounts it came in just like you saw it. The wing, um, the port wing actually hits a hedgerow outside of Basaville Plain, and it cartwheels into the field. And I thought they did a great job of showing that. And the other part of that equation is that the men around in the aircraft don't know that that's Meehan's plane. So you see them in later episodes asking, "Has anybody seen Lieutenant Meehan?" Or you see it in Carentan, the episode, a couple different times, where I think Jimmy Matteo is asking um, Mark Warren, the Blythe played Blythe, "Have you seen Lieutenant Meehan?" And then Lavinson, the lieutenant, comes up and asks, "Has anybody seen Lieutenant Meehan?" when they're getting ready to go into break war. So I mean, they set that up nicely for the third episode, but they don't really tell you it's Meehan's plane. You're left to wonder, just like the men were. So nice piece of filmmaking there.
The last thing I really wanted to touch on as far as the airdrop scenes went was just the CGI for it. Jack, I don't know about you, but I thought for being produced 2000 2001, the CGI in this episode for the airplanes holds up
Oh yeah.
remarkably well, even for 20 years after the fact. Like rewatching this episode yesterday, I didn't even think anything about it. I wasn't like, oh, this is garbage, or like, yeah, this is 2000s. I was like, no, this is, it's not Masters of the Air quality, but it still holds up really well.
Yeah, it sure does. I think the fact that you have them on level flight for most part helps. You don't have any dramatic changes in the environment. Helps that CG hold up.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No, you're
just
right.
my 2 cents on that one.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right.
not
Joe.
not a CGI expert by any stretch.
No, you're right. And I think you could even look at Masters of the Air. I mean, I love the show, but some of the CGI there doesn't look great, let's be honest, but it does get better. But I think with what you see there on Band of Brothers, I think it's fantastic. And like we said, it's 20 plus years ago done. So, yeah, I think they've done a fantastic job with that. You talk about Meehan, where he crashed, the grass still doesn't grow. Nothing grows in that spot still. So if I've been there, I've took my drone over it, and you can see it. You can look on Google Maps, you can see where he crashed, and it doesn't grow, does it, Joe? It's still
No.
it's
The farmers attributed it to the fuel and the oil that is still in the ground. You can see it. There's a depression in the ground in the field right where it is. And Leighton's correct. I've been there during multiple different seasons where and you can actually see the dip in the ground and how it affects the agriculture there. So,
I mean, a good fun. That's not a fun fact, but when Jason O'Mara, that film Band of Brothers, he'd finished because I think he did 3 weeks on set. Somebody said to him, "Oh, they're doing a memorial for Meehan's stick in Normandy this weekend or next weekend, and he went across, and what they did, they found Meehan's a ring, didn't they, Joe? Was it a class ring? What ring? What type of ring was it? Was it a class ring from
I believe
college?
so.
And they found, I think it's in a museum there. I think it's the Dead Man's Corner. But yeah, he went across, and obviously they found Meehan's ring. So yeah, it's an interesting fact there.
It's crazy the amount of artifacts and whatnot that are still, hidden just a couple inches beneath the ground. I'm a huge fan of watching all the videos from the History Underground that they do with Eric Dorr from the Gettysburg Museum, where they go to different sites and whatnot, and they find or they display different types of relics. But so moving on from our jump scene, we're finally in Normandy, and we get to the namesake of your podcast, probably the most infamous line in the entire episode, which is "We're not lost." Kind of a side tangent. What made you guys decide on taking that line from this episode as your guys' podcast name?
I want to
It was
use.
a bit of a shot in the dark, wasn't it, Leighton? We just.
I think it was. I think I want. Well, no, I want to use. But another great line was, the paratroopers were meant to be surrounded. That's episode 6, isn't it? Ignore that. Well, no, I think I think Joe thought of that one. I think we were just having a think, and go away, go to your rooms and have a think about what to call it, type of thing. And I think Joe came up with that. I think it's a great line, and yeah, I think that's Joe's work. That is.
We both talked about it. I pitched a line to you, and I said, it's kind of got a double meaning for us. Like we're not lost, but because we know where we want to be, but we're not really on the X precisely. So I just thought it was a good name for us, and thankfully
it's an approximation.
Yeah. We're in the ballpark. We're in the World War II ballpark was basically what we're trying to say when we settled on the name. But interesting. I love the stuff with Hall, although it wasn't Hall that Winters landed near. He landed near the A Company supply sergeant. Hall, it's actually Hall's. It's John D. He was a member of the 81 millimeter mortar platoon. He does link up with them outside of Breakor and takes part in the assault as well, and he's killed there. So they kind of merged two people into one.
Mm-hmm.
And
that makes a lot of sense,
Major
doesn't
Winters' notes originally. I think his notes originally confused Eric, because he called him Hall, and there's only one other Hall that was there, and he was killed on another C-47 that crashed. So it was Hall's because they said he was a member of 2nd Battalion headquarters, which is where the 81 millimeter platoon was assigned. So it was definitely Hall's.
Yeah.
So again, a little slippage. It doesn't drive you crazy. I really like the storyline. It developed. It allowed them to have that banter, especially when they finally link up with the Garnier character and they get and Malarkey, and they start having that back and forth. Makes for good dialogue. Makes it. What also shows how there were so many of these guys that were from disparate units that would link up together and just go out and do stuff.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why they were trained. Another reason why I really love that line that we chose for the name of the pod. But
yeah, when you look at
I thought that was just a great representation of that.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that, Joe. The different units. With Lipton, he had two guys from the 82nd with him. I mean, don't ask me about real life. I'm sure you can cover that one, Joe. But certainly on the show, they depict that, don't they? People from different units working together, and that's the 82nd.
Yeah, in fact, the Winters column, that group with Lipton and the 82nd guys and Garnier and Malarkey, they actually fall in with a column from 3rd Battalion of 502, led by Lieutenant Colonel Bob Cole, who is the battalion commander. He'll end up receiving the Medal of Honor. Well, he never really receives it because he's killed in Holland, but they end up at part of his column, and then they break away later on, right after the wagon ambush takes place. So. they're all mixed bags. I loved how they showing all these guys, especially when they get to Le Grand Chemin, where all the units are grouped up before they conduct the assault at Breakcore, and you're seeing guys from the 82nd, you're seeing guys from the other units, other parachute infantry regiments of the division. So again, well done for that, showing that mixed bag collection of troopers from different units.
I mean, it's a shame they didn't show Marmion Farm, because I mean that was another place where all the various a number of mixed units, a number of units ended up.
So, did either one of you get the chance to meet Garnier in real life before he passed?
Yeah, quite a bit actually. Bill was a good friend.
So, I'm going to ask you a question, but I have to make sure I'm on the same page as Jack with this. Jack, the banter that Garnier has with Hall, where he's like, is that right, cowboy? He's like, Jeep jockey, all that stuff. With that, he reminded me exactly of Cotton Hill from the King of the Hill series, where he's like, I killed Finny Man. Like, did you get that vibe, Jack?
Kind of, yeah.
So I have to ask Joe, what are you familiar with the King of the Hill series?
No, never watched it. Never had the appetite for it. Sorry.
Okay.
But I will say this: Bill was definitely larger than life. He was,
Bill.
We like to call him the Captain Jack Sparrow of Easy Company, just because of his dynamic personality and storytelling ability. And God bless him. I miss him and Babe. Like you wouldn't believe, two of my favorites that I used to love talking to. I'd drive up to South Philly and go hang out with them and our good friend Tony, and we would go to an Irish pub and buy the boys some Baileys and some chicken fingers, and we'd sit there and then let them and just BS for 4 hours. And but he was he was definitely larger than life, that's for sure.
I always imagine or hope that. Yeah, I was always hoping that the way that he is shown in this series, that in real life that he was like Cotton Hill, the cartoon character, and the way you're describing that really makes my heart warm, knowing that he's close to that character. So
Yeah, that episode though, I mean, obviously with his brother Henry's death, he was there was a level of intensity and malice in him that day. And that's where, later on he gets the Wild Bill moniker there. But for the most part, it was gonorrhea, but most of the guys would call him that. But it later on became Wild Bill after a number of incidents on D-Day, especially.
So besides having a shitty name, what's his problem?
Yeah, it's none of his business, that's for sure. God, yeah. The whole thing with he definitely did shoot a lot of Germans on D-Day. We'd tease him about it too. So there's the sequence in Breakcore, and we're skipping ahead a little bit, where he's next to Lorraine. Now, Gerald Lorraine gets a bit of a bad rub here. He was one of two drivers for Colonel Sink. Gerald Lorraine was a brave man. He was awarded 2 Silver Stars during World War II, but they kind of make him look like he's a punk. And it was actually Bill who missed the German who was running, and Lorraine drills him.
They really did him dirty then, flipping the roles then.
So Lorraine drills the German as he's running, but he doesn't kill him, and he's out there screaming for a medic. And Bill basically, in the middle of this really hot gunfight for, I think it was position 2 or 3, I can't remember, just peppers this German. And he basically says, "There's your effing medic." And it was funny, a few years later at the Reading Air Show, I had joined a reenacting unit. It was an Easy Company reenacting unit. And Bill was visiting. He was our guest that weekend. And I gave him my Tommy gun, and he was sitting there laughing about, he's like, I shot lots of krauts on D-Day, kid. And I said, yeah, but you missed that one at Breakcore. And he goes, yeah, but I got him later on. He was as advertised. Let's put it that way.
kind of continuing on with that train of thought, or at least into like the next part of the episode that involves, a famous Tommy gun scene. Uh, we get that brief interaction between Malarkey and the captured German, who's actually an American. What did you guys think of that particular exchange?
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
this is pre-reading the book for me. I thought, wow, that's, and obviously at the time I wasn't, into reading history that well. I mean, to be fair, I was barely reading books. I could read, but I wasn't reading as much as I do now, and I didn't think, oh, that's unbelievable at all. I just thought, wow, that's interesting. I wonder if that did happen, and I think that was the question for me for a while until I read the book, and obviously they just picked it, and I think in Malarkey's book he says it happened as well. But obviously it's interesting. I mean, what are the chances?
yeah.
He's from Oregon.
I talked with Don about that. Yeah, I talked with Don about that. He was a German Master Sergeant. And Don, it actually he meets up with him exactly in the sequence in the show. It shows just before they get to Le Grand Chemin and the Breakor attack happens, and that's exactly where Don ran into him. And he was from Oregon, and he did go back to Germany and join the service. But in the miniseries, they make it look like he's that German gets swept up in the Spears shooting, and really what happened was they're trying to drive the story about Spears being a killing machine from early on. It really didn't happen that way, and Don told me, he goes, Spears didn't shoot that guy. What happened was later on in Carentan, as they were staging to attack into Carentan, they heard some Tommy gun fire, and Don asked what was going on and said somebody told him Spears is out shooting prisoners again. So they kind of melded the two situations into drive the drama a little bit with that, and then character development of Spears. But as far as Don knows, that German prisoner made it. Because he told me, he goes, I didn't see Spears shooting anybody over in that area. He goes, I had heard that he'd shot a bunch of people early on, but it wasn't then.
Mm-hmm.
But I
want to say Marmion Farm, wasn't it, when he didn't Spears kill the prisoners? Was it Marmion Farm?
No, it was a different location. It was out near Bandonville, which is west of Ravanaville and Marmion.
Okay.
But in that area. But yeah, so Don said that it was really blew his mind talking to this guy who spoke perfect English, sitting there on the side of the road as they're walking into town. I've driven up and down that road a number of times, Leighton. I'm sure you have too, heading into Le Grand Chemin and over to Breakor. So it's just yeah. I mean, again, there's a little bit of dramatic license. Everybody has to remember this is not a documentary; it's entertainment.
Yeah,
it's based in reality, but it's entertainment at the end of the day. And I find myself always saying that when we review like the Pacific or we review Masters of the Air. I mean, it's not a documentary. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be good television.
It's a inspired by story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
I remember watching an interview with Major Winters one time where he was talking about the fact, I can't remember if it was as the book was about to come out or as the series was about to come out, where he calls up Spears beforehand and he's like, hey, this is going to be in the book or this is going to be in the series. Do we have to worry about this? And Spears is like, I don't care. It wasn't like, from what I remember, it wasn't confirmation or denial. He's just like, fuck it.
So there's some interesting, I have copies of these letters between Winters and Spears where he talks about it with him. At one point, Spears says, I never had any problem with, what did he call it? I forgot how he called it. It was a very sanitized word for blowing people away.
Like a legalese way of saying getting rid of people.
Yeah, he had, but then late in subsequent, correspondence with Winters, he actually was getting kind of worried about statutes of limitation and whether or not he could be held accountable for, what he did during World War II. So he waffled a little bit about it in his correspondence with Winters about whether or not he could be held accountable for his actions on D-Day, or if but he said straight up to Winters, I had no problem doing that when I had to. And it's a matter of
I
interpretation in terms of the individual trooper, because some of them took it literally and
right.
killed prisoners left and right. And sometimes they took prisoners because they didn't feel it was right to take them out and murder them.
We
So
I could definitely see how, especially like 90s, early 2000s, a person could be concerned about that, especially seeing as like, I think, what was it, like 2010-ish? There was a Auschwitz prison guard who got found and then like immediately taken to trial, and he was like 98 or 100 years old.
mhm.
And it's like, so there are definitely some people that the courts had zero issue bringing back to address things with.
I think
But
part of that
obviously,
has what side were you on back then
yeah,
has a lot to do with
obviously,
that.
obviously, vastly different circumstances. But I could see where those concerns could come up.
Yeah, and he definitely did those things. Like I interviewed one of his men who was there and took part in the killings, um, and was there when Spears shot his own sergeant. So all those things did happen. So it's not like these are, they made this up for the drama of.
Jack, what did Jack? What did you think of the prisoner scene?
War as hell. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that standard operating procedure for a good part of the paratrooper landing? Like, and can't really keep these guys as prisoners, but we can't let them go. So bang. Just an air of pragmatism, I think, about it.
Well, in practical terms, they don't have the logistics tail to handle the prisoners. When you think about it, they don't have any MPs with them. They don't have a stockade to put
You
them in.
line.
They've got nowhere to keep them.
Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Might have to go and settle my kid in a second. I'm just watching him on the monitor. Sorry to
All right.
interrupt there. I think he's all right.
No,
in a
you're
minute,
good.
But
It's
Yeah.
all good. Are you
Yeah.
are you cool if
That's good of
we?
excuse,
continue.
Kenny.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll just
Yeah.
Let's drive on.
I'll just
We'll
turn
pick
my
them
mic
up on the
off.
side of the road.
All right, go to your kid.
I'll turn my mic off. So.
No, you got the most legit reason to bounce.
That's fine.
Yeah,
You might
honestly.
I'll
cut
just
that
sit here,
bit out,
keep
yeah.
sipping whiskey,
All right.
and we'll
Yeah.
chit
Go
chat.
and get.
Cut that bit out about me. I keep that off social media.
Go and get.
This is what we get for bringing a limey on.
Yeah, a limey father.
Yeah. I
God,
mean,
what was I going to say? I don't even remember.
I don't know, but
Well, that's
I
the
love the
nature
whole
of war.
migration thing. They're migrating all the troops towards the objective, right? They're just. I thought they did just a fantastic job. Oh, you were gonna cut loose on some jokes and stuff, huh?
I remember what I was going to say with the whole the prisoner thing. The common meme that's come up recently with all the recent conflicts is making light of like war crimes. So the recent joke that comes up a lot is it's not Geneva Convention, it's Geneva Suggestions.
Yeah, well, I don't think the
And,
Russians care
Mm-mm.
about the Geneva Convention, and they never have. So they're
Or
doing
like,
what they do.
so we're going down the Geneva checklist. It's not a list of things to do.
Yeah. I think they did a masterful job showing that migration of troops and coming down from the drop zones and trying to get to their objectives. They did it. The uniforms look great. The scenes are really well set up. Leighton alluded to one of the sites that we're on together. It's a band of brothers behind the scenes. There's a lot of crew and cast that are on the page, and a lot of photos from special abilities extras who are there for a lot of these scenes, and to see how they were set up and how they were staged, and then see the finished product. It's pretty amazing, the lengths that the production team went through to bring it to life on the screen. Everything from having, like that scene at the end of Breakcore when Nixon shows up with the tanks, and there's a lot of staging shots for that on that page. They're just amazing to see, like all these
I
extras walking around in jumpsuits and have these tanks lined up. Uh,
I
just
love that the tank that Nixon is riding on, like I don't want to say there's like a tiny amount of Shermans, but there's not an excess amount of them anymore. It's not like the days of A Bridge Too Far or The Longest Day where there's, stockyards full of surplus military
yeah,
vehicles. But I love the fact that they did up the tank that Nixon is riding as one of the amphibious uh, assault tanks, like the ones that had the giant like canvas curtains and
yeah, the
like the
DD
snorkel.
tanks. Yep.
Yeah, because there was literally I think like what like 40 or so of those in real life.
Yeah.
But I thought that was just a fun little
Yeah.
detail that they decided to have that tank be that variant.
Yeah, they had the extended exhaust on them, and those are fairly easy for them to build. They're just made out of sheet metal, essentially. They don't really have the propeller gear or whatever attached to it for the DD tank. But yeah, I agree. I thought they did again. This just you have to give the production a ton of credit for what they did um, in terms of dressing everything properly, and then it was nice to see those little nods. If you look at some of the way the paratroopers gear is set up, if you remember in Currahee, when they're at a pottery and they're getting ready and you see Johnny Martin and he's got the Tommy gun mag pouch um, horizontally on his
Right.
webbing. I mean, these are all real things that paratroopers did. He's also wearing the silk invasion map as a scarf. A lot of guys did that as well. So I mean, there's lots of little nods in there that the production team did their homework. I mean, there are some things that are a little off. Like in one scene, the officers are wearing enlisted caps. They don't have the right piping on them. I mean, but it's very small things, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you're probably not going to pick it up. You know what I
Like
mean?
you'd have to be a real pedant to.
Yeah, yeah. A stitch counter, whatever you want to call it. But I thought they did a fantastic job, and a lot of nods to real people, the real veterans in there. So I thought they did a great job. I mean, it's a nice tribute to them when you think about it. And again, for all the people that complain about any of these miniseries, I think we should all be thankful that there's a team of people out there that has the wherewithal and the financial capital to put on shows like this for people like us who love this
Oh yeah.
stuff, who could watch it all day. I mean, I wasn't joking. I just made a Facebook post before we came on. I was watching Masters of the Air one through two and three. I decided to binge this morning for some idiotic reason. I just felt like watching it. I mean, and for all the people that complain about them, nitnoid details, no chin turrets on the G models of B-17s in the later episodes or whatever. All I have to say is thank God somebody had the money and the time and the wherewithal and the drive and passion to put these shows on for people like us who absolutely love this genre.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely there, and also there's some really bad representation, like way worse than anything these things come out with. I've watched some terrible B and C level movies. Like, yes, they, they're trying and they're making an attempt, but also it's like, my God. Um, but I'm also appreciative that like I am stoked that today, like, so Band of Brothers came out in '01 and it was massively successful. It was a huge hit, and even with being as big of a hit as it was, our the amount of material or series like it was few and far between, because after this, I can't remember, it was a couple of years difference before like the John Adams series came out, and then a little bit after that we got the Pacific. And it just seemed like there were such long spans of time between these great series. um, and then you take a look at like this year specifically, we get Masters of the Air, we get Manhunt, which is about the John Wilkes Booth hunt, we get the Ben Franklin series, and I don't even know what's on the docket for the rest of the year. But we got all of those series in like a 2 month span, and for the good and the bad of them, I'm just happy that like history focused film work is really coming to the forefront as being super popular, and like Hollywood's really pushing it now.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right, and I think we're very lucky to have these products for us to view over and over again, for having the commitment to do 9, 10 episode series of this nature. Um, you don't know when we're going to see the next thing. We don't know what it is. Hopefully, it's something good. I was just watching World War II TV. Paul Wittich had a discussion panel on Masters of the Air, and there were some really good ideas about like the British Special Operations Executive, the SOE that ran British agents and multinational agents in France prior to D-Day, and their efforts, and they deserve to have, considering now what we know, and like a lot of the early histories about World War II had no idea about Bletchley Park and everything that was going on with the Enigma cracking and all of that. It didn't come
Right.
to light. The British didn't declassify that stuff until what, the 70s, 80s, somewhere, no, probably later than that, 90s. I mean, these are important components of the war effort that deserve, and especially because these people did things in the shadows for years and never received any kind of recognition like that. I really, there's a lot of sketchy stuff involved with it historically speaking, but I enjoyed Greyhound strictly because of its topic, the war in the Atlantic, which never gets any play really. Um,
Like
U
it,
five
unless
U five
yeah.
seven one was terrible, historically speaking. Um,
Well,
but
here's a shout out. If you want some more U571 bashing, we have done that film before. It's actually is the longest episode we have done thus far. We spent 3 hours reviewing that film.
oh my word,
So
that's a lot
if
of time
so,
investment
if,
there.
yeah. So if you got some free time, by all means, go check out our U571 episode.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but again, I enjoyed Greyhound, especially because it hit during COVID. And
Right.
and because obviously film and movie productions grinding to almost a halt at that point, it was nice to have this new product that had dealt with a World War II topic that got very little cinema love. And I like the dedication to the story. It might not, a lot of inaccuracies there, but I didn't care. I really liked the story. I liked the drama. I enjoyed the character development in it, um, and I thought it was just nicely done. Again, some sketchy CGI, but it's coming along. I look at a lot of times sketchy CGI is that the ambition of the project's outpacing the technology at times. I found that in a few episodes of Masters of the Air where the CGI just it couldn't match what they were trying to do there. And I give the filmmakers a lot of credit because they are trying to push the envelope and produce a product that is worthy of the topic matter, the
I
subject matter.
was I was very impressed when I heard that in order to do one of their crash scenes, they built a 1-to-1 replica of a B-17 to be able to drag. And I'm like, I couldn't even imagine how much money that cost them to
They actually
fabricate.
had two. They had two 1-to-1 replicas. and they had swap out panels for them, which was really amazing when you think about it. So that to show battle damage, they could swap out entire panels on the aircraft. There's some really great material out there when you go, if you go and look for it, about just the B-17 aspect of it was great. But we're dragging everybody away from episode 2, which is what they came to hear about, right?
That's fair. Before we get back to our last part of episode 2, we have to tell you about a drinking game that me and Jack came up with. So we've done one episode review of Masters of the Air. We're eventually going to get through the rest of them. It's just, scheduling and whatnot. But Jack, do you want to tell Joe about our drinking game that we came up with for Masters of the Air?
Hit me with it. Come on.
Nah, you go for it.
So it's a common theme in the show that the air combat's intense, and the planes are getting damaged and whatnot. But something that happens multiple times an episode is like an engine will catch fire or an engine will fail. So the Armchair Commander's drinking game for Masters of the Air is anytime an engine fails, you have to take a shot.
I thought you were going to say feathering the props.
No. Because if the engine gets blown up, you can't feather the props.
Yeah.
So anytime the engine stops working, you take a shot.
Man, just in one aircraft, you could be, slightly hammered.
Oh yeah.
If you think about it.
It makes the episodes go by really quick.
Didn't we also have another rule that if it shows a plane like falling?
Yeah, I think there was two different conditions.
They've got one that's like, I saw one that's like a bingo card that has like all these little different things, like bash the Brits, and it's all around the perimeter of it. If you read it, there's all these things. It's like a bingo card. It's pretty funny when you think about it. If you read it, like. But the thing with cliches is they're all grounded in truth, right? So I mean, I think we're going to try and get John Orloff, who is the lead developer and writer for Masters of the Air, to come on our pod. That would be a real coup.
Well, if you're ever able to get in touch with him, shoot him our way too.
Leighton's got comms with him, and I
okay.
talked to him on Facebook and Insta. But
I've sent him a message, but I'm sure he gets inundated with stuff. So
yeah, he's getting crushed. There's another guy named Ty Ramey you might want to touch base with. He was the B-17 guy for Moda.
So I think it's with Leighton returning, along with our honorary 5th member of the episode. Lane, do you hear us?
Yeah, do you mind cutting a bit about my kid off? Sorry, I keep Errol off family stuff offline. Sorry, I might have to bounce because he's awake and I've got to deal with him.
That's
no worries, pal.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm right a minute. But yeah, if I just go, my mute goes, that's me gone. Yeah, I got to get back to bed soon. Sorry.
No worries, pal. Take care of the munchkin.
No problem. Yeah, I get it.
Lane, are you heading out now then?
Well, I might have to. Yeah, he's feeding right next to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about we share, while you're here, we share our drink choices with each other.
Yeah.
Jack, what are you having right now?
I'm about to crack open a new Budweiser, and I still got that mellow yellow from earlier.
Solid combo.
Double fisting.
Joe, what do you have tonight?
It's some Jack Daniel's Select. It was a gift. I wrote a book about Operation Urgent Fury. In 1983, a group of medical students was on the island of Grenada, and President Reagan ordered the Rangers and Marines and 82nd Airborne to go down and rescue them. When I went down for the 40th reunion down in Savannah with the Rangers, they gave me a gift of a bottle of Select. So I'm having a little of that. And after I'm done with you guys, I'll probably have some Easy Company Brewing Curry Heat Lager.
You know, I've wanted to try that for a minute, but I haven't been able to get my hands on a 6-pack yet.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like the lager. They've got 3 different beers right now. They've got the Breakcore, the Allborn, and the Curry Heat Lager. So if you get your hands on them, I personally like the Curry Heat one. It's interesting that they're developing beer to match Easy's march across Europe. So each one of them has a bit of significance. And as you go further and further along, the alcohol percentage increases as well. So
Solid.
it's a nice little game to play with the beers.
Lane, what do you have on deck for the evening?
I've got a glass of orange squash. I think you guys might call it cordial. I'm not much of a big drinker.
Fair enough.
Somebody's
you'll
got
probably
to stay sober.
right. You'll probably get a kick out of this, but when we had Matt on a while ago, we were doing our drink sharing, and he had some sort of, just regular alcohol, and it got around to be my turn to share, and I was drinking a local beer from here in Denver, and it was a raspberry Kolsch flavored beer. It was very tasty, but I said the name of it, and the name of the beer is called Princess Yum Yum. And not even like a split second later, Matt's like, "Man, if I was in the same room, I'd be kicking your head in right now." I was like,
Freaking
Yeah,
Matt.
the look of sheer English disgust on his face. Man,
Beautiful.
So in expectation, because I wasn't sure what your views on alcohol was, Leighton, I decided not to drink Princess Yum Yum today to
Oh, it's
avoid
fine. Yeah,
getting
I drink a gin
to,
tonic now and again.
to avoid getting threatened again.
That's okay.
What I did was there's a local coffee company that I like that they roast their coffee beans using uh, discarded whiskey barrels. So it's a uh, whiskey barrel coffee, and I added some uh, Jameson to it. So it's a nice little Irish coffee.
There you go. That sounds like a win. Normally, I don't drink whiskey. I'm a Scotch guy, actually. And my go-to is Glenlivet 12-year-old.
Solid choice.
Yeah. But if I had my druthers, it'd be a Macallan 20.
So I think we should, because we kept touching on it, but we never fully discussed it yet. And I think it's probably important that we discuss this scene, especially for a review of this episode. But what do you guys think of the assault on Breakcourt Manor? Because it is truly kind of like a landmark kind of attack, especially in the story of D-Day. If I'm not mistaken, I think West Point still uses it as like a literal textbook example of how to do an emplacement assault.
Oh, I loved it. The only thing I will say about it is the time that they depict everything happening is like what 15 minutes or so, I think, in screen time. It really took almost 3 hours plus. It took 3 hours plus to conduct all the actions you see in it. I thought it was really, really well done. The set was excellent. I've been on Breakcore with Charles, the owner, many times. The field, they did such a fantastic job in setting it up. The only other criticism I have is the depth of the trenches. It was really a communication trench. It was only about a foot deep. It didn't have wicker lining and all that. But to me, all of that is forgivable because of the immediacy and the visceral nature of the fight. The beautiful Steadicam work in there, the excellent commitment by the actors to know their weapon systems and how to use them. You'll see jams. Guys will be cycling their weapons. They know how to put round, like you watch the machine gunners go through the drills properly. When they end a belt of ammo, they open it up, they put a new one in, they charge the gun, they're back firing. Beautiful work by the actors in terms of commitment. I love the shots. It brings the immediacy of the fight. And I just thought, I also love the cinematography of it, the coloration, the saturation of the film. You know, it's really kind of muted, comparatively speaking. If you've been on the ground there, like in June, how green it is in those fields, and it's so muted in the shots, but it drives the drama quite a bit when you have the environment, um,
I
the
think that
palette
I
done
think
that way.
that muted kind of feeling. I think that's an overall shot feeling too, because I think they're really. I don't know if or what kind of filter they were using, but I think they're really trying to drive home the like overcast, cloudy
Hmm.
aesthetic, because obviously June 5th and 6th were stormy days.
Yeah, the weather was not cooperative for sure.
So
Um,
I'm sure that probably played a big part of their filming choices.
but I love it. I think they had the teams were set up correctly. The vets were still alive, obviously, when the guys were writing it. It was John Orloff wrote that episode, and he had access to most of the participants that were still alive. He could talk to Winters, he could talk to Garnier, he could talk to Malarkey, he could talk to Popeye Wynn. All these guys are still alive, so he could, and Joe Toy as well. So I mean, he could get all those sequences hammered down to the smallest degree. The only thing is there's a time compression piece to it, right? Like I said, it's only 15 minutes or so of screen time. It's actually like 3+ hours to take out the entire battery. And that includes the actions with the tanks that come in that Nixon brings in later on to help finish off a couple of the troublesome machine gun positions across the field. But I thought it was beautifully done. And again, well acted, ton of actor commitment to getting it right. They show the small unit execution of the fight, whereas you throw in the grenades as the Germans are stunned, you can move from cover under the covering fire of your machine guns and your supporting fire from like Ranny and Lipton and guys like that. Beautifully done. And just to me, also having watched it on a larger screen with with the surround sound, the sheer violence of sound when they start cutting loose and the Germans return fire, the cacophony that's generated by the audio aspect of the shooting, just rivals almost like that scene in the sequence in Heat when De Niro and Val Kilmer go in there. The only thing you don't have is the compacted nature of the buildings to drive the sound sonically.
Right.
But here, the violence and sound is to me is just as um, intimidating as it was in that sequence. So, just really, again, absolutely top marks for the production team. You can't do. There's two things you can't do in a movie with when it comes to military, right? You can't do time well, and you can't do geospatial well. Like in the military, when we move, across fields or we're moving a tactical movement, there's plenty of space between people. You can't do that in a movie because they got to fit in the scene. So you tend to have a lot of compression in space and guys moving too close to one another. But I think they just did a fantastic job with the sequence and really, really well done, well acted, well shot, beautifully shot.
I also was a big fan of the sequence, and I remember as a kid watching it uh, when when we first the first time we ever had surround sound in our house, because this was about the time that getting like a surround system was like the in
The,
thing to
the
have.
thing, yeah,
So we got our surround sound set up, and this we put this episode on to like test it out, if you will, and like break like the assault on Breakcore Manor. That like when you get that on surround sound and you got it pumping, like it is some impressive sound editing.
yeah. It could be slightly overwhelming too when if you get it at those crescendo points. I mean, it buffets you sonically. especially if you got a good woofer in your surround sound setup, and you get that thumping of the grenades. They go with that ripping of the 42s, and the 30 calibers are banging away at that more steady drum beat, and then the individual shots from the M1s and the Tommy guns, and you hear the pinging of the on block flying out of the M1s. Just
Right. And then
fantastic stuff.
the occasional zipping sound.
Yep. Yeah. Really well done. And I really love that they got some specific things in there, like Buck Compton with the grenade throw. It actually
Yeah,
exploded.
the little
Yeah,
the
actually
little game of
exploded.
hot potato.
Well, yeah. Well, no, he throws the one grenade and it explodes. They show it exploding on the back of the German who was running away from it. Actually exploded over his head. But yeah, that the whole thing with him bobbling the grenade. If you see, there's another trooper that bumps into him and causes him to bobble a grenade, and there's a sequence where Joe Toy says that's twice. It
Oh
was
yeah.
twice, and if you look, the
Yeah,
great
that's my
thing I love
favorite
about the
part of this
production is because
episode.
they did
God
do their
damn it,
homework.
that's twice.
Yeah, if you see Toy when he's going over himself, his jumpsuit cuff is loose, and you can see some white. That's a bandage. So they were talking to Garnier, and Garnier told them with the leg bag. Joe Toy had a leg bag, and instead of attaching the rope to his belt, he actually looped it around his hand a number of times. So
Oh.
when it came out of the aircraft, it ripped the skin up off of his wrist and his hand. So when he got to the ground, he bandaged himself up. So there's a nice little attention to detail there that I don't think a lot of people will pick up. But if you look for it, you'll see the white bandage around Kirk Aceveto's wrist. That's him basically doing exactly what Garnier told him, which was that Joe had an injured wrist. And then he gets blown up twice, which actually happened. The stock of his M1 Garand absorbed most of the blast, and it was shattered. And he ended up fighting the rest of the way through Grey Corps with basically a stockless M1. So great stuff on for the filmmakers and the production team, and the actor himself committing to that.
So I think it's about the time that we rate this episode. I know it's a bit odd to rate episode by episode, but I hate deviating from my normal routine. So
You've got a standard you got to stick to.
right. So around here we don't do 1 to 5 stars. We do 1 to 5 things, whatever best represents the episode. We're open to suggestions. I personally think a good metric to rate this on would be 1 to 5 leg bags. But if you have any,
I was gonna go 4.5 grenades.
we can just do straight up grenades.
Yeah. I was going to give it 4.5, just because I'm a bit of a World War II nerd, and there's those certain things that we talked about that I'm able to pick out. But I wouldn't be surprised if people watching this, or yourself, or other people, give it five frags instead of 4.5 like I would. But
I would give this. I would give this 5 frags.
Oh yeah.
Jack, how about you?
5. Easily.
And Jack, does Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb have a rating for this episode?
I don't think they do individual episodes. All I could find was just the series as whole, and it was like 96%.
Lame. Well, with that being said, that has been our review of Day of Days. Joe, it was great having you, and it was great having Lane for the time that we had him.
Thanks for having us on. I appreciate it.
If you have any episodes for your own podcast coming up, or social media you want to share, or any kind of projects you want the people to know about, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to give us a follow on YouTube and Spotify, and again, we're on Buzzsprout as well. We're on Patreon. If anybody wants to become a subscriber, we do a lot of giveaways for our paid subscribers. But yeah, you can catch us at We're Not Lost Private Podcast. We're on Facebook. We're on Insta. We're on. You can pick us up on any of those, and thanks for having us on, man. It's been a blast. I really enjoy talking about. I could talk about Easy Company and Band of Brothers and the Vets all day long. And thanks for giving us the platform to do it. And you guys have been great.
Absolutely, and we'd
Thanks
love
for
to
your
have you
patience.
guys. Trust me, this has been one of the smoother episodes we've had recently, as far as tech and scheduling and whatnot. We'd love to have you back sometime, even to just do a regular war movie. Sometime doesn't even have to be Band of Brothers related. Jack, do you have anything to end on?
I do not.
Alrighty. Well, if you've enjoyed this episode, go give the guys over at the We're Not Lost podcast a follow. Please leave a review. The stars do matter. If you want additional content from us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Discord at Armchair Commanders. Until our next Band of Brothers review, I've been John.
And I'm Jack.
And Joe, thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, we're a little hiccupy today, aren't we? Yeah, thanks for having us on, guys.